Tourette's podcast is not a medical advice show. It's a show about experiences. In the course of that, we may talk about medications or therapies or stories from the doctor's office, but don't mistake any of that for medical advice or direction. It's not. Get that only from people or places licensed or certified to give it. Not from a massively fun and action-packed podcast about our life experiences. Such as...
What do you mean, am I okay? Because we'll call John Leguizamo right now. I got his number. We'll call him.
This is Tourette's podcast. I'm Ben Brown. So as I sometimes do, I went back and I listened to some past episodes randomly from each season, including this one. And, this is an exploratory podcast. I mean, that's what it is, meaning it's more about conversation and discovering our connections and so on around this complicated thing called Tourette syndrome. And I was listening to these older episodes, and then I started listening to some more, and, that other voice in my head, the one that's real self-critical and loaded with doubt, that voice basically swung around to me and said, quote, you ascribe all kinds of non-tick related stuff to your Tourette syndrome. Things you're feeling, things you're experiencing, things that maybe everybody experiences in some way. But because you have TS, you always got to think it's because of your TS, when that may not be the case, could just be something else. End quote from that voice in my head. So yeah, a little self-criticism that, it's not entirely accurate. I like comparing notes with other people who have TS. Like, I've got TS, so do you. I never talk about this, but I do this really odd thing. How about you? Do you do the same thing? What do you think that is? Do more people with TS do the same thing too? Does everybody in the world? Well, again, this is all about getting there and having real conversations and comparing stories and experiences so we can thaw out that isolated feeling and come to some human conclusions without going near the junkyard that internet search results sometimes feel like. Who knows, maybe you'll listen to one of these episodes and find no connections whatsoever to yourself. But then you listen to another episode and find 20. That's this podcast, just blowing away that isolation and learning more about ourselves by having these conversations. But I was thinking a little bit more and was like, what's something you have, Ben? What's something you have or something you've experienced that maybe at one time you thought was normal and then you found out it wasn't and you wondered what it was all about? What's another one of those things that you can mention on this podcast just to see if anybody else experiences it? Well, here's one. I have no idea if this has anything to do with Tourette syndrome. Just exploring. But have you ever... So I'll just give an example. And keep in mind, this is something I thought happened to everyone until maybe 3 years ago when I started looking into it. And yes, I turned to an internet search engine to see what I could bring up about it. And it did bring up one consistent thing, a name for this experience that I was having. And here's what it is. So I'll be watching the news or a YouTube video or something, or, hearing a story, just a direct example. I'll be watching a YouTube clip. It's just a video of something. But in the video, somebody falls down on a sidewalk and hits their elbow, hypothetically. Or if it's somebody getting poked by a needle. Or if it looks like a near-death experience or an episode of a certain violent TV show in its final run on HBO. And if I see a depiction of that, or even if I hear somebody describe somebody getting hurt, when I see it or when I hear about it, I get this pain. I see somebody fall, they hit their elbow, and I feel this pain. And sometimes it's really bad. I know this sounds so made up, but that's a feeling I get. Usually it's just in my legs, and frequently it's just above the kneecap on the inside of my legs right there. I'll see a certain kind of injury, and it does have to be a certain kind, by the way. If I'm watching boxing on TV, that doesn't do anything for me. For some reason, that won't do it. But if I see or hear about a certain kind of injury, or a certain kind of pain maybe, I'll get that feeling, which I've brought up a couple times in my life. Which again, remember, I thought everybody experienced this kind of thing. But I brought it up a couple times in my life, once 15 years ago with my friends, and either I wasn't clear about it or they just didn't share the same feeling. They didn't know what I was talking about. Then I brought it up to my wife a few years back, and she was like, nah, don't got that. I don't know what that is. So I looked it up dangerously, and what kept coming up in search results was the phrase mirror touch synesthesia, or MTS. But one part of the definition of that specifically was that when someone with MTS perceives pain in someone else, like I described, I think properly with MTS, that pain is somewhat empathetically recreated in the same body part as the real injury, if you follow me. If a person with MTS sees somebody else hurt their hand, then the person with MTS will feel a pain in their hand. Again, just from what I've been reading online, but maybe there's a definition of it that's a little bit more flexible to, whatever it is I'm experiencing, because it's only in my legs, like mostly around and above the knees, like thigh area, sometimes in the hands. But I guess what I'm trying to say here with this ultimately, because I'm not going into a lecture on what this synesthesia thing is, because I don't know. It's an exploration. And if you've experienced the same thing, which by all accounts is not limited to people with TS by any means, not saying this is a TS thing. I keep seeing that this is a pretty rare thing, and there seems, of course, to be a neurological question to it, so I put it out there, like we do on the podcast. You guys ever experience this? What do you think about it? What do you already know about it? You might know infinitely more than me. To the science folks listening, do you got anything on this? Again, I could Google it, and I did, and I found people describing the same thing that I experienced, but there's just, I think, more to be pulled from a conversation in a personal way that other people listening in on can respond to. And that's really what this podcast is all about. Not trying to be a lazy explorer, but this weird leg thing is something I experience. I'd love to know more about it, but this is a conversation. So what do you guys think? Thank you so much to the new patrons of the podcast. Among them, Sarah Ritchie, doing it in support of a Touretter named Liam. You're actually going to learn a lot more about them in the near future here. Oh, and a big thanks as well to Ramona at Tourette Canada for also supporting the podcast. Ramona has been a really amazing support overall here since day one, really. And, Tourette Canada has their annual conference information out now. It's October 17th through 19th, and you can learn more about that at tourette.ca. I'm going to get more information about this in the near future, so I can add to the announcement. But thank you so much, Ramona, and thank you to the Ritchie family. Can't wait to talk more. If you're a patron of this podcast and you don't mind me publicly thanking you for the support, please let me know. I'll be reaching back out, but if you decide that you want to support the show, I'm just asking if it's okay to thank you by name for the support. By the way, no pressure at all, but if you do want to support the podcast and help it thrive and reach people, or if you want to make a pledge in somebody's name, you can do so at patreon.com/Tourette's podcast. Okay, one more real fast announcement, and then one super short but amazingly cool follow-up to the last episode. Then we'll get to this week's conversation. Just a reminder to go to treatingtourettetogether.org. Again, treatingtourettetogether.org to learn more about a summit of the same name coming up August 18th and 19th in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in the United States. The Treating Tourette Together Summit will bring together people living with Tourette syndrome, their families, healthcare providers, and researchers to set an agenda for the next generation of research on behavioral therapies for TS. The goal of this is to step outside the traditional medical research models and to put the voices of the Tourette community at the very center of the research planning process. There's also a quick survey you should take on the website too. That's treatingtourettetogether.org. Okay, so the last episode with Kimmy was a hit. Lots of people reaching out about it and finding Kimmy on social media. And then Kimmy goes over to the Tourette's podcast discussion group on Facebook, and she posts this screen cap from a text conversation that she had. What happened was one of Kimmy's friends saw that Kimmy had posted something on social media. Hey, I've got Tourette syndrome. Listen to my episode where I talk about it. She puts that up. At least I think that's what happened. But one of Kimmy's friends ends up listening to the episode. And this friend has TS. And she didn't know Kimmy had it. So Kimmy's on the podcast talking about her TS and her tics and her experiences, and her friend starts sending her these messages, saying things like, I'll just read them verbatim. Says, quote, I'm literally tearing up listening to you. The things you're saying, I've never heard someone else say or feel, and I am relating so hard. I'm literally crying. This is so cool. Thank you for posting about it. Tourette's can feel alienating, and I'm literally tearing up knowing this is a thing. End quote. Again, a friend of Kimmy's messaging her about her episode. They knew each other. They didn't know they were both Touretters. That is the kind of outcome, one of them anyway, that really matters to me. I would love to keep hearing stories like that. So thank you, Kimmy. That's awesome. Okay, so now we're getting to this week's conversation. I'm a classic video gamer, meaning I don't really play video games these days, but I still live inside the games that I played on my dad's Commodore 128 back in the 1980s. And that was a really important element of my youth that, yeah, I will tie in with TS in terms of the self-isolation I gave myself, and I actually kind of somewhat enjoyed with the computer when I was a little kid dealing with the things I was dealing with. And I actually learned a lot from it too. But that's one thing we get into in this conversation here with Anthony, himself a podcaster with a show called Dads, Beards, Nerds. Anthony is a co-host of that show, which is all about nerd culture and gaming and so on, but we go way beyond that. Definitely talk about a whole lot more: parenting, music, younger counterculture, preferences that we both had in some variation. Right now, here's me and Anthony. And if you need a swear jar warning, there's a couple everyday curse words here and there, but not talking about coprolalia, just conversational stuff. Okay, me and Anthony. Could you state your name and the part of the world you live in, and just kind of otherwise how you would introduce yourself to a group of strangers?
Yeah, my name is Anthony Flareda. I live in Sonora, California, which is in the mountains. We're like more near Yosemite National Park. Currently work in a casino up here that is like one of the larger casinos up here, but more still kind of smaller compared to like Vegas.
Huh.
But basically a casino employee. I work for a department called compliance, and we basically are the regulatory body between the federal government, the state government, and the tribe. And we make sure that everybody is following their policies and procedures per the compact between the state, federal government, and the tribe.
So is that something it's really specific, and how do you pursue that? Or is it something you fell into, or?
Well, the casino industry, I fell into the casino industry in 2005 when I was just working at a Papa Murphy's. I just dropped out of college, almost at high school, just dropped out of college. And I just figured there had to be more to life than working at a Papa Murphy's. So I kind of got an entry-level job at this casino that I work at, named it's called Black Oak Casino. Starting off as hard count. So I was working the two jobs for a while. And once I realized I was making about double at one job what I was making at the other,
right,
I realized I'm not going to work two jobs. This doesn't make any sense. Plus I had benefits, 401k. I'm just a 19-year-old kid. I mean, having benefits at 19 on your own is something that I totally underappreciated, but as an adult now, I can see like, ooh, I was really lucky, even though I never really went to the hospital or the dentist with it. And then from there, spent the next 10 years just working the casino industry, switching to different jobs within casinos until I made it to where I am now. But I've worked several different jobs, including like a casino host, which is basically like a liaison between the VIP guests and the casino. I've worked in the cage as a supervisor, balancing out millions of dollars of money and making sure it's accounted for. I've worked on the floor with the machines, just worked so widely around the casino in general that when I came back to Black Oak Casino, compliance made the most sense because I've already known policies and procedures from 4 or 5 different departments, and it just made sense that I would try to do compliance now.
When you were working as a liaison, I think you said a liaison with the VIP guests between them and the casino, are your tics really apparent, or do you get questions about that kind of thing, or is it something you can conceal pretty well, or do you care about that?
First and foremost, I don't really care if people see my tics or I tick in front of people. A lot of it has to do with my upbringing as well, which we can go more into that after the question.
Sure.
But I would have guests that would find out, or they'd hear me tick. I've got a vocal tick that I do that's not too loud, but it kind of sounds like it's a like that.
Yeah.
And then I jerk my arms and I flex my neck a lot, blinking. A lot of the normal, I feel like tics that people with Tourette syndrome have. And once they would notice it, they'd be like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I've got Tourette's, and that I do this, and that." And they'll be like, "Oh, I've heard that noise from you before. I just didn't know it was coming from you." Because when you're in a casino, it's super loud as it is anyway. So they just figured it was one of the machines, one of the slot machines. Yeah. But it was in all of my jobs, it's one of those things where. And I've heard this a lot from a lot of the people you've had on your podcast as well, that it seems that people with Tourette's, we don't really come out with it because it's not that we're ashamed of it or anything. We just don't see it as an issue because we've grown up with it all our lives and everyone around us is fine with it. So
right.
I'm seeing the whole, common denominator between everyone with Tourette's is, oh, I don't really tell anybody until they notice it. And then I tell them, and then, it sparks up a conversation.
So you mentioned your upbringing, and I want to get to that in a minute. First, though, you also have a podcast called Dad's Beards Nerds. Do you want to tell us what that is and sort of what it's all about?
Yeah, so Dad's Beards Nerds is gaming and nerd culture centric podcast. We do daily news Monday through Friday, and that's generally gaming. Every once in a while, I'll throw like some sort of a movie theme in there. We pull news from websites like IGN, Kotaku, Polygon, and GameSpot, and then we reread that news on our podcast. It's a lot of fun. It's really, that podcast has evolved as well from what it originally was just a main conversational podcast. But my co-host and I, George, we also do every Sunday we release a podcast that's the Prime podcast, the main one, and that's where we have a conversation with people. Like we just had Jono Peck on, and we talked with him about journalism, games journalism, and writing and whatnot. So with that podcast, I like to skew the questions towards what the person who's going to be on, towards the guest, and what they're interested in. So we had one guy who was really interested in Gundam models and MMA, and I love building Gundam models. So we talked about Gundam models and MMA the whole time.
So gaming, I don't know much about gaming in a modern sense. I grew up playing Space Quest and King's Quest and Leisure Suit Larry and like titles like that.
Ooh, you were in that's a very specific type of gaming.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know
Sierra
many people
games.
who grew up playing those, but that's crazy. Yeah, you like those point and click adventure games, right?
Yeah. Where you would kind of type in your command and just really chunky pixelated graphics. And I guess graphically and conceptually, they were really kind of revolutionary at the time.
Yeah, the hand-drawn graphics, almost like you're playing a cartoon, especially with King's Quest.
Yeah. They're amazing. And then kind of getting back into the, when the screens only had 16 colors. And that was, it was a really important, I guess, massively important part of my childhood because I wasn't always into socializing with friends or anything. And my Tourette's certainly had a lot to do with that. Like playing those games back then, it doesn't sound like a positive or healthy thing to say that all I did was stay indoors and play computer games. And, certainly...
Your escape.
Yeah, it was an escape. And, sometimes, my friends would come over from time to time and we'd play them together. But I really kind of preferred sort of the point and the pleasure of it was just to kind of play these games on my own. And again, not sounding like a healthy way of living when I think about it now. But at the same time, this particular kind of game taught me, my sense of humor and vocabulary and problem solving skills and creative thinking. And so these really pixelated games were a nice thing for me. What's your origin story with gaming, or why that interest?
So first and foremost, what you just explained is I feel like every gamer at some point in their life.
Yeah.
It's just gaming has always been an escape for me, and it's always been fun as well. So it kind of had a symbiotic partnership with it. So my story with gaming is when I was 5, my sister's dad brought home a Nintendo Entertainment System with Zelda and Duck Hunt and Mario.
Yeah.
And then from then it was off to the races. I eventually got a Nintendo of my own, and eventually a Sega, which I had to my mom took back because with my Tourette's, I get migraines with my Tourette's.
Okay.
But it's not something that I found in everybody who has Tourette's, because I have met a couple people who have Tourette's, and I've asked, and they're like, oh, I don't get migraines. So I don't know. Maybe it's just me. But with my migraines coupled with my Tourette's, I would be playing my Sega Genesis for so long and so intensely that I would get migraines. And then finally my mom was like, no, we can't have video games in the house anymore. And then I lost those till I was like, I don't know, 14, 15.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Gaming has always been like something in my life. I've always talked about gaming. When I didn't even have any sort of a console, I subscribed to gaming magazines. I remember having Tips and Tricks magazine for 4 or 5 years and didn't have a single gaming console in the house.
Wow.
And I would buy strategy guides for games. Like, it's just one of those things where I just loved gaming so much that even when I didn't have it, it was still part of my life, and I would still talk about it and somehow stay current. But growing up in a small town, I really was a minority in gaming wise, due to it's a small mountain town and a lot of people just aren't really into gaming. So a lot of this knowledge is just in my head until I found fellow nerds in the town where it could just all come out. And that's basically like, the whole like gaming, like history of how it started.
And now you're podcasting about it. I mean, I think you said it's daily. You really do crank these episodes out. And I've listened to someone who's interested in you as a Touretteer, but what headspace are you in when you're recording? Is it, nerves that set off tics, or is it focused kind of therapeutic feeling where your tics aren't going to bother you? Or
it's definitely focused. When I'm in podcast mode, I'm in like work mode. A fun work mode. The podcast is something I love to do. So one thing I found though, as I've grown up, that when I am intently focused on something, I twitch way less. I've had friends notice that as well when we were really little, building tree houses. Like, hey man, you like barely twitch when we're doing this stuff. And focusing on one thing or focusing on something important or multiple tasks that are important generally allows my brain to not worry about what my twitches are. I don't feel the need to twitch, so I don't feel like I have to twitch more afterwards. It's just I go into some weird mode that's work mode, and it is what it is. So I do find myself, snorting a bit more, which is annoying because as a podcast, when I'm recording a podcast, I want the least amount of noise. And there are days where I will inadvertently twitch more, where like just the snorting or like, a lot of heavy breathing.
Yeah.
So, but for the most part, the thing that, trips me up the most is messing up a word. And then I'm like, damn it, I messed up that word. And then I got to stop and re-record because I'm not going to, I can't be like, damn it, I messed that up.
Yeah,
and then, just keep it in there.
Yeah, I do that with the other podcast I do for my employer. I mean, I get kind of obsessive with it, and I spend a lot of time in the audio quality on the, my diction and kind of how I put in certain inflections in certain sentences, or where, the kind of joints are that I want to emphasize. And I can spend a lot of time on that, and a job that I think will, ideally put me to bed at, 11 p.m. or at least that's, when I should be done with this kind of work. And then I'm carrying it into like 2 a.m. just to make it perfect. And it's, that's definitely something I associate with my Tourette's. And it kind of makes me think more about comorbidities and diagnoses. And I guess that's a question for you. When were you diagnosed? And I guess we could talk about your upbringing here, but could you tell us about the early days when your TS started to become noticeable? I mean, did your parents get concerned and send you to the doctors, or what's the story of how this started for you?
So when I want to say like 8 or 9, maybe even 7, I developed my first tick, which was like, I don't know if you can hear that, but it was me like basically like clicking my teeth, just chewing down on them to make that noise. Yeah. Clanking, I guess. So I started doing that, and it would annoy my mom. She probably just thought it was just some little kid thing. And my mom's was a single mom who would work. So there was one day where she finally like snapped on me. Is you need to stop doing that, or you're going to be in trouble. And it was probably like the third time I've ever yelled at my mom in my life. And I was just like, I can't stop. And then she kind of had that moment of clarity of like, uh-oh, okay, well, shit, what's happening? Yeah. So then my journey of going to the doctor started, of getting EKGs and, tests and multiple, IVs in my arms, during the EKGs to monitor me or give me some sort of like solution or something. Mm-hmm. And they just couldn't find out what was happening. So I was diagnosed, he's just energetic. I've always been very energetic. So that my mom's kind of like, well, yeah, no doubt. Like, of course he's energetic. I live with him. Then at one point they thought I had epilepsy because when I was younger, I believe at ages like 9 months and age like 1.5, 2, I had seizures. So I've had 2 seizures in my life, like legitimate seizures, and I was very, very young when I had them. So because of that history, they thought, some of the doctors, he's got epilepsy. Well, he's got epilepsy. He's never had a seizure since then. So when like my mom would question them on it. So years and years went by, and it wasn't until I was around, I want to say between like 12 and 14, we were living in Mariposa, California, which is another really small mountain town. If you notice, I've lived in a lot of small mountain towns just because that's where I like to live. And there was a doctor from Merced, California named Dr. Hilton. I don't remember her first name, but my mom got word that she would come up to our clinic. And she's a neurologist, a really awesome neurologist, just a stand-about person. So my mom said, okay, we're going to take you to this neurologist and we'll see if we can get some answers. And within sitting down for 5 minutes, she's like, you got Tourette's. My mom and I were like, what? She's like, he's got Tourette's. Like, this is why he's ticking. I'm watching right now. He's blinking in his eyes. He's doing a lot of grunting. He's doing this, and this. That's, common signs with Tourette's. And so from then it was, the usual, we'll get him on some medication, which I took clonidine for the tics, and then Midrin for the migraines, which I ended up going off Midrin much later in life than I did in clonidine, just because the Midrin was really just to make you kind of like calm you down for the migraine. I don't know if you've ever had migraines, but the real only way to get rid of them is you hit Advil or Midrin or whatever you have at the onset, or it gets worse and then you just got to lay down and go to bed. That's really the only way. But with the clonidine, from anyone who's ever been on clonidine knows that stuff makes you sleepy.
Yeah.
Really, really ridiculously sleepy. So to offset that, I was drinking coffee as a 12-year-old boy going to junior high. And it got to a point like my freshman or sophomore year where I was just like, I'm not taking this anymore.
Yeah.
My mom was like, well, you're not? And I just explained to her, like, it just makes me sleepy. And I'm going to school and I'm sleepy. It doesn't make any sense. I'm sleeping for like half my school day. And my mom was just like, well, I mean, if that's what you want to do and you think you can do it, then go ahead. And like, she was very supportive of it. Plus, it wasn't like my tics caused me to hurt myself either. So I think, or yell out obscenities, or my tics weren't necessarily these extreme vocal tics or these extreme, jerking with my body. So she was okay with it. And I haven't taken medication since.
And that's a story we hear a lot, and is definitely similar to my story too, where I just kind of got to a point where every bad thing that the medication did to me, I was really kind of, keeping count of and weighing it against, what I was actually getting out of it that was positive. And there was just a huge, it was a mismatch. And I ended up telling my parents I kind of wanted to stop this. And there was a lot of, if I remember correctly, it could be a phantom memory, but I do remember there, being concerned about that. And how do we do that? Do we just kind of stop it cold? And I think I did. I think I just finished the bottle of pills and never went back. Do you remember sort of maybe the weeks following you ceasing medication, what things were like?
I feel like it was the exact same. Other than being tired, clonidine didn't really do much. It felt like all clonidine really did was make me sleepy, which reduced the chance of me twitching, which I do feel like when I'm sleepy, I don't twitch as much. Yeah. But for the most part, I don't feel like clonidine was a benefit to me at all, especially drinking coffee to offset the tired. I'm basically offsetting the actual medication. So it didn't make any sense. Once I got, into high school and my critical thinking was a little better, and I've never been like the biggest critical thinker or have the best common sense, but even I could tell that like there was really no point in taking it. Mm-hmm. And as an adult, I've never looked back. I've never taken any sort of medication for it because my tics are manageable, which I'm very grateful for. My tics are not anything really loud or really wild, with the exception of my like booping is what we call it when I make my vocal tic. Yeah. But for the most part, I'm very fortunate to be blessed with a Tourette's that isn't as extreme as it could be, which really helped as a child. And I know like not a lot of children with Tourette's have that. And my oldest son has Tourette's as well, and he's developing tics. Okay. So, but his aren't super bad either. So I'm just hoping that he gets as mild as me. But growing up, I was very fortunate with that. So it just one of those things where it's never really affected my life too much, other than letting people know that I have it once they notice that I have it.
And so, if it's okay, I'd love to talk about your son in a little bit. But yeah, these days, have you sensed your tics kind of? I mean, they always kind of fluctuate. You'll have good days and you'll have some kind of heavy tic days, depending on who you are. But have you, I guess, noticed over the years whether they've kind of chilled out, or have your tics increased, or do you know kind of where you're headed in terms of having TS?
I don't feel like they've increased. To be honest, I feel like they've been the same ever since I was in high school, about the same rate. Yeah. Like multiple guests have explained on your podcast, and you've explained, with holding in your tics, it's still got to come out at some point. Yeah. I don't know if anybody's ever given you this reference, but the blinking reference. But I kind of akin it to having to use the bathroom. You can hold it in as long as you want, but eventually you have to pee.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that's what I've always told people too. It wasn't one of those things where I heard a bunch of the people say it and I came up with my own. I've always given people the pee example just because I think it's kind of funny because it's urination. So
it's very relatable. Yeah.
Yeah. But I do notice when I am stressed, I'll tic more. But once again, like with my job, there are certain times where I'm super focused in, because part of that job relies on having to do an investigation when we're, kicking someone out of the casino. So, I'm focused in on getting all my facts, writing a report, and then sometimes people are, can be dicks for the latter, for, can't find a better word for it, but and then we got to kick them out. So I'm focused on that, like you got to get out of the casino and we're getting them out. Right. So a lot of times when I tic, it's actually when I'm walking in the hallways, where there's really no one around, and, do my vocal tic. But, sometimes, they get the better of me and I got a tick in public or down at the casino. But once again, it's loud. So my vocal tics go pretty much unnoticed.
So outside of the volume of the casino, are you ever in situations where you have to explain yourself to people who aren't initiated with your tics?
No. I mean, unless they notice and I feel the need to explain myself to them, but I've never explained myself because I felt like I had to.
Yeah, and I worded that question terribly, but yeah.
Oh, no,
yeah.
You're good. You're good. I understood what you meant. I didn't want anybody listening to think that they have to explain themselves for their Tourette's. But when people ask about it, I had a cousin who didn't realize I had Tourette's until we were in our 30, 31, and we were at a family gathering, and my aunt Sue, she had a guinea pig that she let run around the house, and guinea pigs make that noise. It kind of sounds like it sounds like what my vocal tic is, and I didn't realize, I never told him, or that he never realized, and so I'm I'm twitching, I'm doing my vocal tic, and he's like, "Where the hell is this guinea pig at? Is it somewhere? I've looked everywhere in the living room and I can't find it." And then my wife starts laughing, and I don't know why she's laughing. And then she tells me, I'm like, "Why are you laughing?" She tells me, and I just start busting up laughing. And I let him know, "Travis, it's me. It's my tick," and I do it for him. And he goes, "What?" I was like, "Yeah, I have Tourette's." He's like, "Nobody ever told me you have Tourette's. We've been cousins for 32 years. I never even knew this." And so it turned into this funny little family anecdote. But it's just one of those things where if I see someone notice it, I'm like, "I got Tourette's. I'm not on cocaine. I promise."
Well, so your family and you mentioned sort of your upbringing and kind of how that's influenced how you've composed yourself, maybe with your Tourette's, and I might be wording that incorrectly too. But what's the story there with your upbringing, and sort of was there anything about that felt supportive or made you feel more comfortable about having TS? Or
oh yeah, I like to think that. I mean, from stories I've heard from other people with upbringings with Tourette's, especially going through school, like elementary school, junior high, high school, I've heard a lot of horror stories, and I was fortunate to not have any of those. I got made fun of because of my Tourette's once in junior high, and some random kid who didn't like me goes, "Hey," and the kid who said whatever he said, looked at him. He said, "You can't make fun of him because he can't help that." So it was one of those things, you can make fun of him for his shoes and his clothes, but Tourette's is at the line because he can't help that. And it was just I remember having this moment of holy crap, everybody, nobody cares. This is great, and they care. They don't care, but they care to a point to where it's you can make fun of this, and this, but it only things they can't help. It was just. That's when I realized I had it really, really good and really easy, because I'd watch documentaries, or not documentaries, but 60 Minutes would do a Tourette's expose every once in a while. And my mom would make me watch it, and there would be, teenagers or kids that would just scream and they're ridiculed. And it made me very happy and very fortunate that I grew up in a very small town where everybody knew everybody, and everybody knew what everybody had. And it's just, I'm very lucky because I know everybody doesn't have that who has Tourette's. So it's one of those things in life that I'll always cherish, that I went to school with a bunch of kids who could be dicks at times, but they were understanding of your own personal faults that you had, and wouldn't really attack you for that. Because I feel like that had a big influence on my confidence as an adult as well, because I wasn't and it's not like I got made fun of in high school really, or even bullied, other than the normal stuff you would see any after school teen movie. Yeah. But it just, I know it had a big impact on me as I got older in my confidence, knowing that, well, it's just Tourette's. If you're going to make fun of me for my Tourette's, that's kind of silly, and I'm not going to bat an eye because I can't help it. So, but you can't help being ugly. So there's nothing I can do about that. So it was one of those scenes where if someone was really going to take a shot at it, I was going to take a shot back at them, and I wasn't really afraid to go at the throat, because you're coming at my throat about Tourette's. I can't help it,
Well, what's your son's experience? Do you know if he kind of embraces the same outlook, or is he having any difficulties in social adjustment or anything like that?
I know that, so when I talked to him about it, so my son is he's on the spectrum, is not high on the autism spectrum, but still low on it, but he's enough on there that, he's qualifies for it, I guess. I'm not really sure what the terminology is on that, but he does a lot of throat tics, and as of lately he goes a lot.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I've asked
I do
him
that too
from
sometimes.
time to time, hey, how are things at school? Like, does anybody notice your tics? Do they say anything? And sometimes they're like, oh yeah, so some kids will say anything, but he doesn't like. I can't tell. It doesn't sound like there's something bad with it, but it is getting to a point though where I do need to let the schools know. So that way, my mom was a big proponent on that. Every school I ever went to,
Yeah.
she made sure that all the teachers knew and the principals knew, which I think was probably another reason why I had an easier time. But it doesn't seem that I've seen that it's affected him. I do ask him from time to time just to check up and make sure, because his tics are noticeable. They're not super loud, but they are loud enough to where you notice them, just like my booping.
So do his teachers seem to kind of know what's up? And I mean, were they easy to talk to about this kind of thing?
Yeah, most of them have always just been like, oh, okay. Like, I think that, kids are kids, and kids, they see a lot of kids with weird quirks and little things that are, unique to them, that I think most teachers in 2019 are equipped and trained to deal with that sort of stuff. Plus, it's not like he's got epilepsy and I'm telling a teacher, so he's going to be seizuring on you, every once in a while. It's just, like, hey, just as a heads up, I just want you to let you know, Mikhail has Tourette's, and he twitches from time to time. This is what we've seen him do. So, he's not trying to be a disruption to the class or make fun of you in any way. It's just his Tourette's. And they're usually like, oh, cool. Okay. Thank you for letting me know. And, I'll look out for that.
Well, it's nice to hear, because and I've said this on a number of episodes, but I get a lot of emails from parents. I'm not a parent myself, and definitely don't feel qualified to kind of take on some of the questions that they're asking. But a lot of it does have to do with sort of what's appropriate to do at school, and how do I word this to the principal or superintendent or teachers or whoever I need to alert at the school. And a lot of people ask about lesson plans and things like that. Did you set something up like that was kind of specialized, or is it just kind of, the usual mix of things?
Yeah, it's just business as usual for any school kid. It's just, with his tics, it's not really affecting him lesson wise. So
yeah,
and like you said, there are some. I've heard some of the stories with the parents when they ask you that, and my best advice is just to be forthright with the teachers. Let them know. Like my son has Tourette's, and I've never known a teacher who tried to argue with that, because I think that especially teachers or people who deal with children all the time, they'll know when a kid is acting out, and they would know when they won't. But if you don't let them know, how are they supposed to know that your child isn't acting out? Because there are kids are silly. They do silly stuff like trip themselves on purpose, or just throw a pencil at a wall or up on the roof, like back, do spitballs. So obviously that's not, those aren't really twitches, but some teachers see multiple kids doing this a day, so they might think that your child's twitches are them trying to act out. So the best thing you can do is just be straight up and let the teacher know what they have, what they do, what their twitches are, and they're generally really cool about it, or at least in my experiences with the teachers my children have gone to. And it's just my oldest at the moment. I have 3 boys, and I have not noticed any sort of tics with the younger 2. Just my oldest, so he may be the only one with Tourette's at the moment, but we're not 100% sure on the other 2.
So is your family, or you or your son, are you guys interactive with other Touretters or other sort of Tourette communities or anything like that?
No, not really. I think he's kind of at an age where like he understands he has it, but it's not something where like he's searching out. I know as I've gotten older, I've searched out people, but it's never been something where I felt like I needed to find other people with Tourette's. Plus, when I'm around other people with Tourette's, it makes me want to twitch more.
Yeah, me too.
So it's not that I don't want to hang out with people with Tourette's, but it does like amp my twitches up a lot. So I would love to know more. And I do know a couple. I have ran into a couple by just happenstance, throughout my life, but I've never been like, oh, I need to go to a meetup or a gathering. And not because I don't think I'll get along with the people. It's just I'm like, I know I might twitch a lot more, and finding the time for it as well, because where I live in Sonora, I don't think there's many people with Tourette's, so I might have to go to like Sacramento or go further down as like Fresno to find like a larger group of people with Tourette's that meet up and get together.
So is your listening audience with your podcast, are they aware of it, or is that just too off topic as something to discuss?
I'm not sure they're aware with it. So my Tourette's is something that I've really only come out like with telling people within the last like 2 or 3 years. It was just so before I was podcasting, I've been in like many bands, and I did the whole music scene.
Yeah.
And it was
me too.
Never something I wanted to be like known for. I didn't want them to be like, oh, that's that Tourette's guy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it was always something that I always try to lead with what I do first, and then when Tourette's comes out naturally, I let them know about it. Same with the podcasting, which I have no issues with telling people on the podcast if anybody asks about it, but I've never like openly said it. I think I've made references to it because it is part of me. Like during a podcast, maybe I'll twitch. I'm like, oh, sorry, that was my twitch of Tourette's, but it's never been like a focal point.
Could you talk about your music background a little bit? What do you play, and sort of what drew you to that?
So I actually don't play anything. I've always done like vocals, and I've always been in bands, kind of like post-hardcore bands that was screaming and singing.
Yeah,
so
that
generally
was me too.
I would scream, I would sing, and I would write all the lyrics. Obviously, well, not obviously, but some of them I would collaborate with. Like in one band I was in called Create the Compass, the bassist and I did vocals. We would collaborate on writing. So I've actually. I tried to learn violin when I was young, and music only equates for me when it comes to being like vocal with vocals. And for some reason, when it comes to learning an instrument, it was just always something where like I've got to use my brain, my eyes, and all of my fingers at the same time. And I've never been like the best multitasker, especially when it comes to using multiple parts of my body that isn't like a sport, where I've got to think about it. Like, like in track or in wrestling, it's that motor function has been there for years and years and years of using my arms and my legs and, my head at the same time. But with music, it never really equated to being an actual musician and playing something. It was just so foreign to have to, use my fingers in that way, multiple different fingers. And it was just a lot to memorize. So, music also was, an outlet for me. And I've found over the years, I believe that gaming was that outlet. And when I didn't have gaming, there was a lot of time where, I went right into sports. So what I found over the years is I'm very much a person who needs like an extracurricular activity. And that extracurricular now is, streaming and the podcast. But before that, it was music. And, I put my all into the music, whatever it takes was always the mentality. And, it's kind of, as I've gotten older, that mentality has mellowed out a bit more because now I've got a wife, I've got kids, but I will always need that extracurricular activity that happens to be making something or entertaining someone. It's just something that is in me that I will never be able to get rid of and will always need to do regardless. I can't explain why. I don't know why, but it just, entertainment as a whole has been something that I've always loved to do.
Yeah, I mean, without even needing to explain, I mean, I relate to that entirely. I mean, so many things of what you said just really kind of line up with my life and my background. And so you said post-hardcore. That is definitely, or just, hardcore and punk and everything like that. That was a really, really appropriate fit for me when I was in my, teenage years and even now. I mean, it doesn't really kind of leave you if that's your interest. And what you're talking about, the kind of outlet and the sort of kinetic piece to that, that's that was probably 90% of it for me. Is I had melodies in my head and I wanted to learn how to play them, but when it came to the act of being in a band, it was way more about just the movement, the kinetics, the sort of like energy release and all that. And that was extremely good for me.
That 20 to 30 minutes is addicting on stage. It really is. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean,
you want more of it. You get that first dose and you're just like, oh, I want that every night.
Yeah. And when you said, you gave it your all, I mean, it really is like that. It's just that the payoff is so good that, you want to do whatever you can to make it work and make that kind of, have as much longevity as possible in your life. And, I still, write and record music and I still play with people. I'm married now. I don't have any kids or anything like that, but it's the kind of thing where life kind of hands you other things where you're able to kind of get the same kind of dosage. And I use that in quotes, but that's something like music and the act of, whether it's playing an instrument or just singing, can give you. And that's something that I hear from a lot of Touretters. It's not just, and it's other kinds of genres too. It's just kind of whatever you feel like your appropriate outlet is. And there are cultural influences and things like that too. But it's just, I relate to that so much. And it's funny you said post-hardcore because that whole sort of cluster of genres that are, kind of influenced by, late 80s, early 90s and all that was entirely me. It's exactly what I went to.
Yeah, bands like, Under Oath and then Silverstein, back in, 2003, between 2006, where real big influences. And as I got older, I still listen to it. I mean, my range of music is really like, I try to keep a wide range, but I always go back to post-hardcore or hardcore music or metal. Like it's always some sort of variant that I go back to.
Yeah, it's kind of similar for me. I mean, the stuff I latched onto was a lot of the sort of late 80s, early 90s stuff, in DC, like bands like Nation of Ulysses, and just these bands that had more of a very, very kinetic presence. And it's just something that I visually latched onto, lyrically would latch onto, because it was a different kind of expression. It wasn't lyrics that rhymed. It was something a little bit different that you could kind of, and it's just this open door that it just seems like this isn't regular music. It's kind of the license to do whatever you want and whatever suits you creatively. And I mean, I can't calculate the benefit that had on me as someone with Tourette syndrome and needing an outlet like that, and not really doing that well with socializing with, kids in my class. And I had friends and all that, but it's just, it was different. And that paid off a lot.
Yeah, music-wise in high school, I never really connected with anyone music-wise. Like, I got into Static X and Slipknot and, A Perfect Circle in, I want to say, like, sophomore year. And none of my friends were into that music. They were either into what was popular on the radio or into, country. And I was very much, like, alone on that until, like, my senior year. I found a new friend who went to another school, and he was in the same music. And it was like, oh, well, have you heard this band, this band, this band, this band? I feel like a lot of people who are into the music we are, and you're like, no, and it just opens it up.
Yeah, and there is, you made the parallel with gaming too. I mean, it's just the kind of people who gravitate toward that sort of thing. It's to where you need something a little bit maybe unusual in your life to kind of spend time with and latch on to and learn from and grow with. And that connects you with other people who kind of are cut from the same cloth, even if they don't have Tourette syndrome or anything like that. It's just finding that less regulated, potentially chaotic area where you can kind of roam free and express yourself for a bit. And that's something that we've said in past episodes too, with people who did want sort of specialized lesson plans, or not even lesson plans, but just considerations to where they want some kind of room to breathe, or permission to kind of get up and walk around or go in the hallway for a bit. It just, the benefit you get from that release definitely adds up to a lot.
Yeah, a lot of this stuff too is it's definitely, and has always been, a way for me to kind of like harness my mind into one thought process, because I mean, ever since I was little and can remember, I've always had a million different things running through my head at once, whether it's, TV shows, music, or random jokes. Like, there's just a lot of stuff going on in my head at any given point in the day. And it was always a way for me to sort of like focus that energy into one specific theme where my mind was only thinking of it. And it was just one of those things that just kind of helped me just, I guess, calm, like almost calming. Same with like the same reason why I love doing dishes. It's one thing, it's a focal point, it has an ending. And so if I've had a bad day, I'll go straight to the kitchen and start doing dishes, because I know it has an ending to it. And it's something where I can put on a podcast, I can do it, and I'm good afterwards, and I'm calmed, I'm centered, and I'm like, all right, let's go, let's do it.
So with those kinds of focused processes, and I can do the same thing with the act of podcast editing or writing, or just things that are very detail oriented that I can focus in on. Do you also? But at the same time, I do also have ADD, and I mean, do you kind of deal with that as well? Is that a consideration with you?
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason why. That's another reason why I love those things, is like I was saying, I've just, with my high energy, and I've never been officially diagnosed with ADD, but I'm pretty sure it's one of those things. It's like a package deal with Tourette's. I've never known anyone with Tourette's who didn't have it. It's just one of those things where, because of that, my mind is always racing, and I've always got a million things going on in my mind, and it's just calming. Like to have something to focus on. Like you said, with podcast editing, when I'm, doing the daily news and I'm editing out little chunks and recording chunks here and there, it's just, that's all I'm thinking about. And everything else gets like kind of pushed to the back. And it's just a way for me to kind of get a release from my own mind, I guess.
There's that commingled sort of set of comorbidities that often do come with Tourette syndrome, and I know a lot of people who've been listening want that to enter into the discussion more, or at least the kinds of questions that I'm asking. I mean, do you have anything else like that, diagnosed or otherwise? Anxiety, other sleep issues, anything like that?
Not anxiety or sleep issues. Like I've never had to take sleeping pills or anything like that. But I'd say I probably have some OCD. It's just I'm very much a person who, when I put something somewhere, I would like it to be there. Or, like it's very hard when you have children. You said you don't have any kids, so you'll know this one day because you'll put the controller in one spot and then you come to watch TV and you can't find the controller for 30 minutes because your children took the controller and decided it needed to be in the bathroom next to the toilet. So, like, especially because, I have my stream set up, so I like everything in a specific spot because I don't always have it all set up. So I need to find it. I need something here, or I'll put something there. And I do like notice that when something's out of place, it does it gets me a little riled. If I can't find it, I definitely find myself getting mad. Not like insanely mad or angered, but just kind of flustered. Like, why isn't this here? Like, why can't I find it? It should be in a spot where we can find it. But when you have children, children are chaos, and chaos at times, and they don't care if you like the controller on the left couch arm. They just go, "Oh, this is the controller, and I'm going to put it underneath the couch," for whatever reason goes on in their mind.
Yeah, it's funny because I definitely don't need kids to kind of hide away the remote from me. I do it to myself, where I feel like there's sort of this autopilot part of my brain that will do something that I'm not conscious of, or I'll be on the phone or having a conversation with somebody, and I'll pick up my keys and then I'll bring them to the other side of the room and put them somewhere. And it's just that's the last I'll see of them, for the day. And I'll be looking all over the house. It's kind of, I don't know. I feel like I have some short-term memory issues, and my wife has never asked me about that, but I'm pretty sure she thinks it. That it's
you have to have her on the podcast and just be like, so what do you think?
Yeah. That is something I've kind of thought about. I mean, we did a little bit of that on episode 0 of season 1, but that was more just kind of establishing my background with her and what she sort of noticed about my tics initially. But there's definitely more to tell about that, and what she picks up from me when I'm ticking, and how she decides to, compose herself, or, but the thing she's really, really good at is not caring, and I mean that in a really good way. It's that, if I have a lot of tics, she doesn't feel compelled to ask me, are you okay? Or do you need anything?
She knows. Yeah. She knows. It's just Ben being Ben.
Yeah. And it's like the more you kind of make of it, the worse it gets in a way. And it takes somebody, with, she picked that up, and I thought that was something really great that she sort of brought. We've been together 8 years now, but that was something really great that she brought together with our relationship, and just how nice it is, again, to have that room to breathe, the room to kind of tick and have that release, and have it not really be a big deal at all.
Yeah, see, that's my wife too. She just kind of lets me do my thing. Same with, all my friends, they know I have it and they're just like, whatever. Yeah. Sometimes we'll laugh at it because it'll be in a really opportune point, or a really like funny moment, or we'll have one of my friends will bring in a friend and they'll be like, what are you doing? And then we both just kind of laugh. It's like, oh, I've got Tourette's, and they're like, oh man, I thought there was like a doorbell ringing, or it's always something funny or weird. And but I've always had a really good attitude with my Tourette's, and been able to laugh at things. Like, I think a lot of it has stems from my mom being like real serious about it. Like, I remember when we were watching The Pest with John Leguizamo, he says at some point, I've got Tourette's. And I remember my mom just looking at me and being like, are you okay? Are you okay? And I'm like, right. What? I'm like, it's a movie. Of course I'm okay. That's funny. Like, what do you mean am I okay? Like, because we'll call John Leguizamo right now. I got his number. We'll call him. We'll talk to him. Like what do you mean am I okay? Yeah, it's just parents are so like, because I mean, no one else in the family has Tourette's other than me and then my son. Yeah. So it was just one of those scenes where she didn't know what to do. It was like brand new, thing to throw into your already super energetic ADD son, and she's just kind of like, "Are you okay with it? Does that make you angry? How does it make you feel?" And I'm like, "Makes me laugh." And she's like, "Okay, cool."
With your wife, did you bring it up before she could ask about it, or?
I think, I did tell her. So in my life, when I have been, intimate, I've let them know beforehand, because if you're going to date someone, they should probably once I knew that things with my wife and I were serious is when I let her know, because
Right.
I didn't want her to think like, what drugs is he doing? Like, is he doing drugs? Like,
Right. Yeah.
because with some of my twitches, especially like the like arm jerks and stuff, I've seen a lot with working in casinos. I see a lot of people who happen to be like on, drugs like cocaine and meth and stuff. And they do a lot of those actions as well. And I'm like, no, I'm not on drugs. It's my Tourette's, and all this energy is natural.
Yeah. And that is why it's important to, even if you don't want to talk about it or tell your coworkers about it, or HR, your boss, or whoever, it is important and we talked about this with Amanda Talty, for employees to really kind of know their rights. People with TS or people with any sort of disabilities in the workplace, how the law protects you when people do kind of, make an assumption about you or perceive you a certain way that might not be compatible with your job otherwise. And I've never had to go through that, but again, I definitely spent my adult life kind of concealing my TS and and being very intentional about not talking about it. But where I am now, it's there's a percentage of employees who do know I have Tourette's. No big deal to them. Bosses know and all that. I mean, it's just they've not only been just kind of so what about it, they've also been very cool about not noticing. I mean, very nonchalant. We'll have staff meetings, and I'm clearly ticking. I'm clearly making sounds that are way too rhythmic for it to be just me clearing my throat or having some sort of it'd be any sort of habitual thing. But that's another nice thing is that they know if I want to talk about it, totally welcome to. They understand it's not anything that needs to be kind of part of the daily conversation.
Well, one thing is, like, I just want to do this real quick. I don't know if it's opportune, but I want to shout out. There's this Twitch streamer called Sweet Anita.
Oh yeah.
I was gonna say
I know her.
She's another streamer with Tourette's, and she's got a lot. I wouldn't say worse, but more severe than I do. But I just, if you're interested to see what people who stream or in some sort of media capacity are, what you had the gentleman from the news, I can't remember his name. You just had him too.
David Begnaud. Yeah,
you've got David, and then you've got Sweet Anita. So like you can watch my stream, you can watch Anita's, and you can see like hers is a lot more severe. But it's just, I always get it. Like it always kind of lights a fire under my own ass when I see other people with Tourette's just like doing what they love to do regardless of their Tourette's. Yeah. Because that level of confidence is something that a lot of us in some sort of media area, or whether it be music, streaming, podcasting, we've taken years and we've slowly built that confidence up to a point to where it's not that we don't care. It's just, it's business, and it's something we love to do. And if we're going to Twitch, we're going to Twitch. And if you have an issue with that, that's on you. And I just, like, that was one of my things with the streaming and the podcast, and now being a little more forthright with that I have Tourette's is I just want people out there to know, whether they're younger, whether they're teenagers, adults, that even with your Tourette's and even with your tics and what other little subtleties you have and little, quirks, that you can still go out there and do whatever the hell you want to do regardless. But I am aware that level of confidence takes time to build up. But if you build that confidence and you believe in yourself and you just have a certain level of not caring what people think about your Tourette's, but also like you've said, like when they do notice it, just let them know, like, oh, I've got Tourette's, this is what I do. It's not that big of a deal. Instead of making it a big deal, then people are going to make it a big deal. And I just, like, Sweet Anita is a prime example of that. She's got a lot of vocal tics. She swears a lot. She says random things because of her Tourette's, and she just doesn't care. And it's one of those things that I love to watch her stream, because it's inspirational to me, because I see someone who has Tourette's, her severity of her Tourette's is way worse than mine. I'm very fortunate that my Tourette's is mild. I can get away with not twitching for a while before I have to twitch, but hers obviously isn't, and she's out there just kicking ass. She's, just doing her thing, and I freaking love it. It's just one of those things that inspires me when I see another person with Tourette's just killing it at whatever it is they want to do, and they've looked at it and said, that's mine, I'm taking it regardless.
Thanks for listening. Since the intro was so long, nobody wants a long outro, so I'll just say thanks to Anthony. Check out his podcast, Dads, Beards, Nerds, on any podcast platform. Thanks to you for listening and writing in and giving me a minute to catch up on emails, because I still have a few to answer. Tourette'sPodcast.libsyn.com for all past episodes. Patreon.com/Tourette'sPodcast to support the podcast. Tourette's Podcast discussion group on Facebook. Join up. At Tourette's Pod on Twitter. Tourette's Podcast on Instagram. That's a new addition. And Tourette'sPodcast@gmail.com to get up with me. I'm going to bail out now, but I hope everybody has an amazing weekend or an amazing day, whatever day you happen to be listening. I'll talk to you soon. This is Ben.